Hi everyone and welcome to the Wrestling Paradise. Today we are going to talk about the final speech of the Ultimate Warrior. This larger-than-life wrestler with an incredible energy who was one of WWE's biggest stars in the 90s. On April 7th, 2014, he did a promo that is absolutely mind-blowing when you know that he died on the next day. And that's what we will focus on in this video. You will learn, among other things, the incredible blackmail he did in the middle of Summerslam to Vince McMahon, and the emotional story behind the book that he gave to the WWE boss. How Hulk Hogan offered Warrior to have sex with his own wife, and all the bad things he said about the leader of the Hulkamaniacs before making peace with him. And even how the legend Jake Roberts planned to beat him up with walls of quarters on the day of the Hall of Fame in 2014. And you'll never guess why he asked Linda McMahon to do his introduction speech on that night. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the Ultimate Warrior's final speech. Here we go. To understand the full scope of the speech that the Ultimate Warrior made on Monday Night Raw on April 7th, 2014, and to understand how strong it was on a symbolic level, it is fundamental to be aware of several elements about it. When we think about the 80s in WWE, there's a good chance that Hulk Hogan is one of the first names that comes to mind. He was the great star of the company, who greatly contributed to make wrestling very popular at that time. Before that, a few years later, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock took over during the Attitude Era and carried sports entertainment into another era of success. But another significant character had an impressive rise between these two great periods, and he could have had an equally important place in history as the legends I just mentioned. The Ultimate Warrior. This former bodybuilder who signed with WWE in 1987 was clearly what we can call a larger-than-life character, whose intensity is mind-blowing in my opinion. He had an impressive physique. He sprinted to the ring. He shook the ropes with all his power. He had this face paint. He even made a kind of animal noise in his promos. We can say that he was indeed a warrior, and his energy was crazy. All these elements made him very popular with the fans, and at the end of the 80s, he seemed to be the ideal successor to Hulk Hogan. The two men were going to have a clash of the titans, a real superhero match at WrestleMania 6 on April 1st, 1990. And on that day, we can say that there was a real passing of the torch, since the Ultimate Warrior became one of the very few men to beat Hulk Hogan clean, and the title was his. At that moment, we could have thought that he was going to be WWE's top star for several years, and it's true that looking back, that's what I would have believed too at that time, after that prestigious victory against Hulk Hogan, which was tremendous. He seemed to be the new main eventer of the company, but nothing went according to plan at all. Within 2 years, he would lose his title, take a break, and end up getting fired for failing a drug test. But above all, an incredible event that happened during this period was when, at SummerSlam 1991, he had somehow taken the show hostage by demanding Vince McMahon to be paid as much as Hulk Hogan, who was still there, and to have the same privileges as him. If not, he would not take part to the main event of the show. At first, Vince had no other choice but to accept, but at the end of the evening, he suspended him without any hesitation. What we can point out is that the Ultimate Warrior, with his popularity, was overwhelmed not to have the same status as Hulk Hogan, and the relationship between the two men was already bad. But you will see that this behind-the-scenes rivalry will last a long time and will become much dirtier. Make sure to stay until the end of the video, folks, because, believe me, they did not hold back their feelings. In the following years, there would not be many notable things in the Ultimate Warrior's career, except for a quick victory at WrestleMania in 1996 against Triple H, and a short WCW run where he lost against Hulk Hogan, who absolutely wanted to get revenge for his defeat at WrestleMania 6. When his wrestling career ended, the Ultimate Warrior still managed to get a lot of attention. Between conferences at universities where he gave big speeches on life choices to students and interviews in which he was not afraid to say all the bad things he thought about some of his former colleagues, he turned a lot of people against him. The one who was perhaps the #1 target of his rants is Hulk Hogan. Of course, these are only the opinions of the Ultimate Warrior, but personally, I think I have never seen a wrestler criticize one of his former rivals in such a personal way. While on the one hand, Hogan said that he found that the Warrior was not worthy of being his successor at the time, on the other hand, his old opponent considered that it was a shame that the Hulkster had a Father of the Year award in 2007, while he completely destroyed his family with his toxic behavior, according to him. That Hulk Hogan is a hypocrite whose whole life is a work. That he is a liar, a backstabber, that he treated his former colleague Wendy Savage very badly. He claimed that Hogan is a junkie who encouraged all the other wrestlers to take drugs too in order to control them, and that he even used to offer his co-workers to have sex with his own wife, which the Ultimate Warrior apparently refused. In his eyes, he is a bad father, an egomaniac who doesn't accept that others can also shine. Do you realize how far this is going? When we know everything the Warrior said about Hogan, the scene they would share together, and which we will talk about later in the video, is even crazier. His relationship with WWE would be just as bad for many years. First, in 2000, the company and the Ultimate Warrior had already been in court for copyright-related problems concerning his character, where WWE ended up paying $890,000 to Ultimate Creations, the wrestler's company. Then, in 2005, the Federation made a very controversial DVD called The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, in which superstars, but also officials and even Vince McMahon completely buried Warrior, saying that he didn't care about his opponents in the ring, that his promos sucked, that he thought he was his character in real life. Once again, it would end up in court, and without a shadow of a doubt, a reconciliation seemed absolutely impossible. Personally, I find it crazy that WWE took the trouble to produce a whole DVD to do what was actually a big shoot promo against one of its former superstars, which is very rare. Although, it should be noted that initially, they had offered the Warrior to make a traditional DVD about his career, but he refused. In the end, reconciliation was still going to take place despite all this fuss for years. The company 2K Games, which was in charge of WWE's video games, announced in July 2013 that the character of the Ultimate Warrior would be available in the 2K14 game. And he even re-embodied his character for a promotional video, in which he had painted his face, something he had not done for years. About this experience, Warrior tells, "It was very interesting for me. When I was on the road, it was something I used to do every day, but I'm not the same person anymore. For me to paint my face, it makes me think of things that I don't think about all the time. When I was on the road and putting the paint on my face, I became a character, and that character operated in a completely different way. Some of the qualities of my character came over into my everyday life." He himself admits that having children and seeing his daughters grow up changed his outlook on life. And in January 2014, what was even unthinkable a few years before happened. On January 13th, the WWE announced that the Ultimate Warrior would be inducted into its Hall of Fame. Although he had not been in the company for 18 years at that time, and at the age of 54, he would be reunited with the one he had such a tumultuous relationship with all these years, Vince McMahon. During the rehearsals for the Hall of Fame, they met again, gave each other a hug, and Vince said, "I saw the person I knew and loved for so many years." For the record, Warrior even offered Vince a children's book called The Little Engine That Could, which tells the story of a little train that helps a big train to cross a mountain, and that keeps repeating the phrase, "I think I can," to achieve this impossible mission that he will succeed. And as a matter of fact, it was Vince McMahon's favorite story when he was a child. And when he started in WWE, Vince told Warrior that he was just like this little train, that he should never give up under any circumstance. The wrestler gave him that book with a note in which he said, "Vince, thank you for the opportunity to go from I think I can to I know I can. Always believe, Warrior." Afterwards, Vince said that when he gave him this book, he didn't understand at first, but Warrior explained to him that it was something that the boss told him many years ago. And in the end, Vince was very touched to know that someone took the words he told him to heart, and that he always kept listening to him. The two men really had a special relationship, and Warrior even saw Vince as the father he never really had, since his own father left when he was only 12 years old. Backstage at the Hall of Fame, another mind-blowing scene almost took place. The legend Jake Roberts, who was also inducted that same year, still had a deep hatred for Warrior because of the behavior he had towards him in the early 90s. He says that he planned to meet Warrior again after all these years, and that he had a roll of quarters in his pocket which he planned to use to beat him up. Can you only imagine if it had taken place? Fortunately, Warrior took the initiative to go talk to him at a time when Roberts had his back turned, and to apologize for his past behavior. And there would also be a reconciliation. But the most memorable scene that took place during that weekend was the one between the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan. After they had been burying each other for years, the Hulkster went to shake his hand, apologized to him, telling him that he loved him and that he regretted his actions. Warrior said that he made mistakes too, and the two men made peace. And yet, initially, Triple H asked Hogan as a personal favor not to go talk to Warrior at that moment, fearing that it would ruin the atmosphere. In the end, it went very well, and the idol of a whole generation of fans even had a nice introduction speech by Linda McMahon, Vince's wife, on that day. Linda was the closest person to Warrior in the WWE, and she understood him. Sometimes he even called her on the phone to tell her about how he felt, and went to sleep at the McMahon's home. So that's why he asked her to introduce him. The fact of the matter is that the Ultimate Warrior was able to make a speech at the Hall of Fame, saying in particular that being the father of his two daughters was the most awesome thing he had done in his entire life. And according to Triple H, Warrior felt really good on that day. He had a smile on his face all the time backstage. He even had a big pop from the audience at WrestleMania 30. And the day after the showcase of the Immortals, on April 7th, 2014, after having been able to move on from the past and to live several moments that I find symbolically magnificent on a personal level, he was going to return for the first time since 1996 to Monday Night Raw, to do a promo that sounded very prophetic, giving the following events. Speak to me, warriors! As I thought about what I was going to say this evening, it's been hard for me to find the words. Well then, you shut up, warrior, and let me do the talking. No WWE talent becomes a legend on their own. Every man's heart one day beats its final beat. His lungs breathe their final breath. And if what that man did in his life makes the blood pulse through the body of others and makes them bleed deeper in something larger than life, then his essence, his spirit will be immortalized by the storytellers, by the loyalty, by the memory of those who honor him and make the running the man did live forever. You are the legend makers of Ultimate Warrior. In the back, I see many potential legends, some of them with warrior spirits. And you will do the same for them. You will decide if they live with the passion and intensity, so much so that you will tell their stories and you will make them legends as well. I am Ultimate Warrior, You are the Ultimate Warrior fans, and the spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever! Personally, when I hear this speech, I think that there are especially two big ideas that emerge from it. The first is that, in a certain way, he looks back at his life and clearly evokes the idea of death, as if he was about to leave us and that he was looking back one last time to what he was able to accomplish being the character of the Ultimate Warrior. He seems to have reached an inner stage where he knows that he can die in peace, because he has left behind a spiritual legacy that will never disappear. The second, in my humble opinion, is the idea of passing the torch. This idea that the fans will now have to find another superstar to love and encourage who is worthy of becoming a legend. We can say that he was looking to the future, hoping that one of the wrestlers of the new generation would become his successor in terms of intensity and passion. Did he know that his end was approaching, which would explain even more his actions in the previous days? Unfortunately, the unthinkable happened. On April 8th, 2014, the day after this memorable speech on Raw, and a few days after entering the WWE Hall of Fame, the Ultimate Warrior died at the age of 54. Apparently, people had already noticed during the weekend that he was sweating a lot, and that he was breathing hard. And he had a heart attack while coming out of a hotel in Scottsdale, Arizona. He leaves behind his wife Dana, whom he married in 1999, and his two daughters, Indiana and Madigan. It's a tragedy that took a lot of people by surprise, and the timing of it is really mind-blowing. Almost as if it was written that he had to have all these last beautiful moments in WWE before passing away. And it's amazing that, despite all the problems he had with the company since the 90s, the Ultimate Warrior was able to end his story on a last positive note. WWE would even create the Warrior Award in his honor, which will reward every year people who live their lives with strength and perseverance. And for the record, during his speech at the Hall of Fame, he himself had already asked for an annual award to be created to honor the individuals who work hard behind the scenes of WWE, without whom nothing would be possible. The fact of the matter is that through this award, we can say that his legacy survives, and more generally, and as he expressed it in his last promo, his spirit will always continue to run among his fans. And that's what mattered the most to him. This is also the reason why he changed his name in 1993 by officially becoming Warrior, his birth name being Jim Hellwig. He cared a lot about his character. He was aware of the positive influence he could have on a whole generation of fans. And what was more important to him than anything is that his fans find the warrior spirit they have inside of them. After a tumultuous career that ended with a final reconciliation, we can say that he managed to write his own legend. And this is how our video on the final speech of the Ultimate Warrior ends. By retracing the significant events of his career since the beginning of the 90s, and in particular his unstable relationship, to say the least, with the WWE over the years, but also with his former rival Hulk Hogan, we were able to realize all the symbolism of his last promo on Raw in April 2014, and even the final days of his life. He was able to bury the hatchet for good with several people, and to get the recognition he deserved, because, without a shadow of a doubt, this real larger-than-life superhero character was unique. And that makes me ask you a question. What do you think of the Ultimate Warrior? Do you like his intensity and his particular universe? Or do you find him too cartoonish, or maybe a little too full of himself? Tell us what you think. It would be interesting to read your comments and to share our opinions together. We can say that this topic raises a lot of questions. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay in the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?